Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a genuinely fascinating stack of source material to get through today. I mean, it's pretty dense.
Oh, absolutely. It is a remarkable collection of texts.
Right. So we are looking at this metafictional literary project, and it contains two interlocking sci-fi novellas.
Yeah, and they are quite different in tone, which, well, we'll get into that.
Exactly. The first one is called The Amnesia of Perfect Systems by Jan Borian, and the second is The Soft Methodology of Unbecoming by Dea Warsh. Plus, we have the accompanying glossary and the author's own notes to pull from.
Which really helps contextualize the whole massive scope of it.
Yeah, it really does. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a radically different take on the classic first contact trope. Like, we are going to unpack how humanity might respond to an alien intelligence, not with, laser weapons or prime numbers, but with philosophy and 4,000-year-old jokes and bureaucratic paperwork.
It attempts to bridge the vast cosmic scale of the universe with the very mundane reality of human organization. It's brilliant.
And to get us into that mindset, I want you to imagine something. Think about the last time you sent a highly personal text message to someone, and then you waited for a reply.
Oh, that agonizing wait.
Right. You wait an hour, maybe a day, and the silence starts to feel really heavy. Now, I want you to stretch that timeline out. Imagine waiting 40,000 years for a text message reply.
That is a very long time to be left unread.
Yeah, seriously. And when that reply finally arrives, you realize something that completely shifts your understanding of reality. Like, the entity you have been trying to contact hasn't been ignoring you. They have actually been silently reading your private diary the entire time.
That immediately reframes the dynamic. You operate under the assumption that you're waiting for a connection to begin, only to discover the connection was happening in the background, constantly, without your active awareness.
Yeah, that is the core premise we are exploring today. And we're starting with Jan Borian's novella, The Amnesia of Perfect Systems. We are thrust way out into the outer solar system following the scientist named Yeva Salisch.
She's stationed on Volograd, right?
Yeah, Volograd. It's an observational outpost orbiting a massive gas giant called Mesferon. And Yeva has been out there for 11 years.
Which is a huge detail.
It is. The text really emphasizes the crushing routine of this. Like 11 years of just cataloging ice samples, fixing atmospheric scrubbers, and staring out at storms that are literally larger than planet Earth. It paints this picture of science as just deep space isolation.
Well, the isolation is key to her character. Borian makes a really compelling point early on, that science, especially at that level of observation, is essentially the disciplined practice of not knowing.
Right, she's not out there having daily epiphanies.
Exactly. She is building a catalog of tiny, seemingly insignificant facts, just waiting for a pattern to emerge.
And that pattern finally emerges when she finds a fact that completely breaks the rules.
Yeah.
She's analyzing this ice core sample, designated 7T452. Inside this ice, which carbon's dating places at roughly 40,000 years old. By the way, she finds a physical structure.
And it's tiny, isn't it?
Super tiny. It is microscopic, just 0.3 millimeters across, but it is geometrically perfect. It possesses these angles and symmetries that ice simply does not form naturally. Like, it implies intentional design.
Right.
And on the exact same day she uncovers this, the station's receivers picked up a brand new, non-repeating alien radio signal.
The synchronization of those two events is really the catalyst for the entire narrative. After 11 years of absolute silence on that station and 40,000 years of this microscopic structure sitting dormant in the ice, both elements become actively relevant on the exact same day.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want to push back on that timeline. Any reasonable person is going to look for the causal link, right? Like, why now?
That's a natural question.
If an alien species dropped a physical marker in the ice 40 millennia ago, why start broadcasting the radio signal today? It feels like they planted a seed and just set a 40,000-year alarm clock. But biologically speaking, we were still painting on cave walls back then.
Right, yeah.
So setting a timer makes no logical sense.
Right. What's fascinating here is that the alarm clock analogy is where human bias really gets in the way. We experience time linearly, right?
Yeah.
Like 1 second after another, like a painter applying single brushstrokes to a canvas.
Yeah, just moving forward.
But the text reveals that this alien intelligence has been present in our solar system for approximately 600 million years.
600 million.
Exactly. And to an entity of that scale, time isn't a sequence of waiting. They view time more like a completed painting. They see the past, present, and future concurrently.
So they weren't like waiting for a specific date on a calendar to roll around.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They were observing the system for a qualitative change in the environment. 40,000 years ago, when early humans first put pigment on a cave wall to represent an animal, that was a threshold.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the emergence of symbolic behavior. The alien intelligence dropped that microscopic marker in the ice to signify that a new, self-aware variable had entered the equation.
So they weren't waiting for a timer to expire. They were waiting for humanity to develop the capacity to actually understand the signal they were always going to send.
Exactly.
That brings us to the signal itself and how humanity even begins to process it. So the Outer System Authority dispatches a xenolinguist, Dr. Maren Salt. And the text notes she has spent 23 years preparing for a hypothetical first contact.
A lifetime of preparation, essentially.
Yeah. And when she arrives, she finds a connection between that 40,000-year-old ice structure and the new radio signal. She claims they share a native grammar. Now, I struggled with this part of the source material. How do physical angles in a microscopic piece of ice translate into radio waves?
It is a brilliant concept,
Yeah.
basically utilizing a form of technological synesthesia. Dr. Sold realizes that the physical structure in the ice is actually a three-dimensional representation of a mathematical sequence. Think of it like a topographical map of a sound wave. When she runs the incoming radio frequencies through a visualizer, the peaks, the troughs, and the intervals of the audio signal perfectly trace the exact geometric angles of the physical object.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the shape of the object is literally the structure of their language.
That makes so much more sense. So the physical object was basically the Rosetta Stone for the audio broadcast.
Exactly right.
And once Dr. Solt decodes this native grammar, she realizes the radio signal is getting more complex every day. It shifts into an interrogative mode. It's not just a beacon anymore. It is asking a specific question.
And it's quite the question.
It is. It asks, are you the kind of thing that knows it exists?
It completely bypasses everything we assume an advanced civilization would care about. They aren't asking for our coordinates or, our technological capabilities or our understanding of physics.
Right, no math equations?
No, they are asking the most profound philosophical question a conscious system can ask another.
It's a terrifyingly specific question, and it puts Yeva in an impossible position. Like, how do you even answer that? Because if you transmit a mathematical equation, like the Fibonacci sequence or the value of pi, you just prove you possess computational intelligence.
Right, a computer can do math.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a computer does not know it exists.
Yeah.
So to prove humanity is truly self-aware, Yeva initiates something she calls the Phenomenology Protocol.
The Phenomenology Protocol is really where Borean's novella shifts from hard science fiction into deep philosophical territory. Phenomenology, as a discipline, is the study of conscious experience from the first-person perspective.
Okay, so it's not objective.
Right. It is not about describing what the world is. It is about describing what it feels like to experience the world.
So instead of sending raw data, Yeva compiles this massive 240-page document. She titles it 40,000 Years of Trying to Say So. And she fills it with things that demonstrate what the text calls recursive self-reference.
Which is such a great phrase.
It really is. It's like pointing a camera at its own monitor to create an infinite tunnel. She wants to show the aliens the machinery of the human mind actually recognizing itself.
That is a very apt way to describe it, because you cannot answer a question about self-awareness with mere facts. You have to answer it with a demonstration of the mind reflecting upon its own nature.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at what Yeva actually includes in this 240-page transmission, it is just wild. Like, she isn't sending a scientific manual. She's sending the ultimate human mixtape.
A very weird mixtape.
Very weird. She sends descriptions of that very first cave art. She includes passages from the Epic of Gilgamesh, specifically the parts where Gilgamesh is grieving and fundamentally refusing to accept the concept of his own mortality.
Yeah.
She even includes a 4,000-year-old Sumerian joke about a dog walking into a tavern.
The inclusion of the Sumerian joke is my absolute favorite detail in the book because it perfectly illustrates the concept of the surplus of consciousness.
Let's explore that term, actually, because it seems completely central to Yeva's entire argument.
Right.
What exactly is a surplus of consciousness?
Well, if you look at cognition strictly through the lens of biological evolution, an organism really only needs enough intelligence to locate food, reproduce, and avoid predators.
The basics.
The baseline requirements for survival. But humanity possesses a massive cognitive surplus beyond those basic needs. We have the capacity to ponder infinity, to create art, and as you said, to invent humor.
Right.
A joke about a dog in a tavern has absolutely zero evolutionary survival value. It doesn't help you hunt, and it certainly doesn't protect you from danger.
But it does require you to hold two conflicting realities in your head at the exact same time. Like the setup and the punchline recognize the incongruity between them and actually find that mismatch amusing.
Exactly. A machine can calculate, but a machine cannot be amused.
Yep.
This surplus, the ability to look at the vast and different universe and find it absurd or beautiful or deeply tragic, is the exact evidence the alien intelligence requires. It proves that the universe, through human biology, has achieved astonishment at itself. We are the universe looking back at itself and reacting.
Wow. So Yeva takes this massive document, this phenomenology protocol full of all our human grief and humor. She formats it into the alien's own geometric radiogrammar, and she just transmits it out into the dark.
A huge leap of faith.
It is. But if that is how a brilliant scientist on the edge of the solar system handles first contact, we have to ask how the rest of humanity processes the sheer weight of a 600-million-year-old alien intelligence. Which leads us to our second novella, Dioric's The Soft Methodology of Unbecoming.
Yeah.
And we get a very different answer. Humanity processes it by filing paperwork.
The transition between the two novellas is intentionally jarring. I mean, we move from the majestic existential isolation of deep space to the claustrophobic, deeply absurd world of a Kafkaesque bureaucracy right here on Earth.
Right. We meet Marlise Vey, who works at the Bureau of Ontological Consistency. Her office is located on floor 14, which is officially designated as provisional because the building's architectural records insist it only has 13 floors.
It's so absurd.
It is. So what does this all mean? I have to admit, as a reader, you hit the second novella and you experience severe thematic whiplash. You go from contemplating the dawn of human consciousness to reading about a coworker named Corrections who wanders the halls carrying an empty folder, waiting for, quote, conditions to be adequate.
Right, yeah.
Why pair a cosmic, mind-bending first contact story with a satire about a soul-crushing, bureaucratic middle management job?
It seems like thematic whiplash until you examine what the Bureau of Ontological Consistency actually does.
Duh.
So ontology is a philosophical study of being and reality. The text heavily implies that this bureau was not created out of malice, but out of absolute panic.
Panic.
Yes.
Yeah.
When society encounters something that completely shatters its understanding of the universe, like a 600-million-year-old alien signal, the natural human response is terror.
Oh, I see. We encounter something totally unclassifiable, and our first instinct is to build a box to put it in.
Exactly. The bureaucracy is a societal defense mechanism. To maintain ontological consistency means forcing reality to adhere to our predefined categories, even when those categories are completely inadequate.
Yeah.
The Bureau is just humanity's way of managing the terror of the unknown.
Okay, that actually explains Marlise's specific job perfectly. She manages the catalog of persistent absences.
Yes.
And these are concepts or phenomena that no longer physically exist but continue to shape reality. Like, the text gives examples like dead languages that still dictate how a modern culture structures its thoughts, or obsolete societal fears that continue to drive economic behavior. She is basically categorizing ghosts.
She is categorizing the lingering effects of the unexplainable. But Marlise approaches her work quite differently than her colleagues do. She develops a practice she calls the Soft Methodology.
The Soft Methodology. Walk me through how she applies that on floor 14.
Well, every morning, Marlise takes 30 minutes to simply sit with information that refuses to fit into any of the Bureau's neat folders.
Instead of forcing it.
Right. Instead of forcing an anomaly into a premature category just to get it off her desk, she allows the unknown to remain unknown. She practices epistemic uncertainty.
Epistemic uncertainty meaning being aware that you don't possess the knowledge to understand something and choosing to tolerate that limbo rather than rushing to a false conclusion.
Yes. It is a profound, quiet discipline. She sits in the gap between human understanding and actual reality, and she waits patiently for the truth to reveal itself on its own terms.
That patience directly mirrors the 600-million-year patience of the aliens watching Earth. Like, Marlise is doing on a micro level what the aliens are doing on a macro level.
That's a great way to look at it.
And her patience is ultimately validated because the alien reply finally arrives back at Station Volograd.
And it is vital to note that the reply is not a simple, confirmation receipt. It is described in the text as a massive, multi-layered cord of meaning. It takes Dr. Sold hours to translate even a fraction of it.
But when she does translate it, the aliens formally reveal their 600-million-year presence. They explain that they have watched life evolve on Earth. They watched the dinosaurs, they watched the mass extinctions, they have seen biological complexity arise many times.
Yeah.
But they clarify that this specific phenomenon, a species capable of recursive self-awareness, a species that can write a phenomenology protocol, is incredibly rare. And they send back an assessment of humanity that I honestly found genuinely moving.
That was beautiful.
They say, rare enough to be precious, numerous enough not to be alone. You are what we hoped.
You are what we hoped. It is a stunning validation. It confirms that the entirety of human expression, our art, our philosophy, our desperate attempts to understand ourselves, was never just screaming into a void. It was an active correspondence, even if we didn't know the other party was on the line.
And that revelation trickles down through the Earth's bureaucracy, and a memo containing Yeva's 240-page transmission eventually lands on Marlise Vey's desk on floor 14. This is the exact moment the two novellas finally fuse together.
Yes.
Marlise reads the transmission, and she has this massive epiphany about the true nature of her soul-crushing job.
She realizes that the catalog of persistent absences has been entirely misnamed.
Right. She renames it the Catalog of Persistent Presences because she understands that every filed form, every bizarre bureaucratic procedure, and every piece of organized data in human history wasn't just busy work.
It had a deeper purpose.
Yeah. We used to think of human art and record keeping as throwing a message in a bottle into an empty ocean, just hoping it might wash up on some distant shore. But Marlise realizes it's more like we've been leaving the porch light on in a dark forest. Like, we didn't know if anyone lived in the woods, but it turns out someone has been sitting in the trees watching our light the entire time.
That realization just shatters the illusion of the bureaucracy. Marlise recognizes that the human compulsion to record, to file, and to organize was actually our species' unconscious attempt to make ourselves legible to the universe.
Yeah.
We were building an archive, driven by an instinctual hope that something, someday, would read it.
So she stops using the official bureau forms. She takes out a blank piece of paper and writes a personal letter directly to Yeva Salisch, creating what the text calls the glossary of incompletions.
Yeah.
She bridges the massive gap between a mundane office worker sorting files and a deep space scientist talking to gods.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this convergence raises a critical point about the authors themselves, Jan Borjan and Desruches. If you look at the author notes provided in our source stack, they explicitly state that they approached this collaborative project from two different philosophical starting points, or what they call different wounds.
Wounds.
Yeah. Borjan wrote from the perspective of sincere scientific wonder. Orich wrote from the perspective of oblique, bureaucratic surrealism.
So they basically tackled the exact same existential problem. How do we relate to the unknown from completely opposite ends of the human experience?
They did. And by structuring the project this way, they illustrate a vital concept. True correspondence requires a gap. The distance between humanity and a 600-million-year-old alien intelligence, or the distance between a scientist and an office worker, is not a void that prevents connection.
Right.
The distance is the medium that makes the connection possible. Without a gap between two entities, there's no reaching. And without the act of reaching, there can be no correspondence.
The idea that the distance is the medium itself is incredibly profound. I mean, it completely changes how you view any form of separation. It acts like gravity, you know.
Yeah.
It actually requires space to function.
Exactly.
And I think that is the perfect lens through which to apply this deep dive to your own life. Obviously, you probably aren't translating alien radio signals or managing a catalog of persistent absences, but we all constantly navigate our own provisional realities.
We all encounter situations, people, or emotions that completely defy our established categories of understanding.
Think about a moment when your personal reality shifted. Maybe you went through a sudden career change, the end of a foundational relationship, or just a profound shift in your own identity. When you are faced with that unknown gap between what you thought your life was and what it actually is becoming, how do you react?
Do you panic?
Yeah. Do you act like the Bureau of Ontological Consistency and try to force this scary, unclassifiable reality into an old, comfortable folder just to regain a sense of control?
Or do you have the discipline to practice Marlise Vey's soft methodology? Can you sit patiently with the epistemic uncertainty? It requires immense courage to let the gap be the gap, without prematurely naming it or categorizing it until the truth of the situation is ready to reveal itself.
It is so difficult to resist the urge to just hit the panic button and file things away so we don't have to look at them anymore. But if you can tolerate the discomfort of not knowing, that is where the actual truth lives.
It is the fundamental difference between simply reacting to the universe and actively corresponding with it.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over, derived directly from the meta-themes of these texts. We discussed how Yeva's phenomenology protocol proved that our art, our poetry, and our jokes are the ultimate evidence of our self-awareness.
Right.
It is how we prove to a cosmic audience that we possess a surplus of consciousness.
We demonstrate that we can observe our own existence and find it astonishing.
But consider the other side of that coin. What does our endless, maddening, bureaucratic red tape prove? We all complain about it, the endless forms, the performance reviews, the rigid procedures. But what if the bureaucratic paperwork of human society is actually our species' ultimate coping mechanism?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Is it possible that our obsession with filing and categorizing is just our collective way of managing the sheer terror of living in a vast, unclassifiable universe? A universe that, as it turns out, has been silently watching us try to organize it for the last 600 million years.
We construct walls out of paperwork to hold back the infinite.
We really do. So the next time you are stuck on hold, or filling out a seemingly pointless form at work, or simply waiting for a text message reply, remember, you aren't just waiting in a void. You are participating in a 40,000-year-old correspondence. And someone, somewhere, is reading your diary.